The cave breathes, and sometimes it stops. Kartchner Caverns lies 14 miles south of Benson, Arizona, concealed within the Whetstone Mountains like a secret the desert kept for 50,000 years. The limestone formation extends nearly 2.5 miles beneath the surface, a network of passages decorated with formations so delicate that a single touch from human skin can halt growth that took millennia to accumulate. The cave maintains a constant 99% humidity and a temperature that hovers near 68 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. Conditions so stable that scientists initially believed the system was entirely sealed from the outside world. It was not. The Whetstone Mountains themselves are remnants of an ancient seabed, pushed upward during the tectonic upheavals that shaped the American Southwest roughly 70 million years ago. The rock here is Escabrosa limestone, porous and riddled with channels carved by acidic groundwater over epochs. Local ranchers had long known about sinkholes and small openings scattered across the hills, most leading nowhere, most barely large enough for a coyote to squeeze through. The land belonged to the state technically, but in practice it belonged to the silence, miles of scrubland where cell signals die and compasses occasionally spin without explanation. The O'odham people, whose ancestors inhabited this region for thousands of years, referred to the Whetstones as a place where the earth spoke in its sleep. Spanish missionaries in the 1700s documented similar beliefs, noting that local guides refused to camp near certain rock formations after dark. These accounts were dismissed as superstition by subsequent settlers, though a 1923 geological survey made passing reference to acoustic anomalies near the southern ridge, a notation that received no follow-up investigation. The modern story of Kartchner Caverns begins in 1974, when two cavers named Randy Tufts and Gary Tenen discovered a small sinkhole exhaling warm, moist air. They spent hours widening the opening, eventually squeezing through into a darkness so complete it seemed to have weight. What they found would later be called one of the most pristine cave systems in North America. But before they found the stalactites and the underground pools and the formations that would eventually draw hundreds of thousands of visitors, they noticed something else. The air moved, not in gusts or drafts, but in rhythm. Every 4 seconds approximately the narrow passage exhaled, then inhaled, then exhaled again. Tufts later described it as feeling like standing inside something alive, though he was careful to add that he meant this metaphorically. Tenen was less certain. In his personal journal, recovered after his death in 2014, he wrote, "Randy says it's barometric. I don't know what it is. I just know it felt like we woke something up." The two men kept to their discovery secret for 14 years, fearing that public knowledge would lead to vandalism or commercial exploitation. When they finally revealed the cave's existence in 1988, negotiations began to transform the site into a protected state park. During this process, environmental consultants conducted extensive surveys of the cave's atmosphere, documenting the breathing phenomenon in clinical terms, differential pressure between the cave system and external atmosphere, modulated by the narrow entrance shaft, creating a measurable and predictable airflow pattern. The explanation satisfied most people. It did not satisfy Dr. Eleanor Vance. Vance was an atmospheric physicist from the University of Arizona who joined the cave's environmental monitoring team in 2001. Her specialty was microclimate analysis, and she had spent her career studying airflow patterns in enclosed spaces, mines, bunkers, subway systems. By 2003, she had installed 17 precision sensors throughout Kartchner's accessible passages, measuring air pressure, humidity, temperature, and acoustic resonance at intervals of every 6 seconds. What she found did not match the official explanation. The barometric differential model only works if the system is passive, Vance explained in a 2004 interview with the Tucson Weekly, her only public statement on the matter. What we recorded suggests the airflow is being actively regulated, not by fans or any mechanical system. We checked. Regulated by something we couldn't identify. Her data showed that the breathing pattern remained consistent regardless of external weather conditions, storms, temperature swings, even the pressure changes caused by passing aircraft. None of it affected the 4-second rhythm. More troubling was what happened when her team attempted vocal communication inside the deepest monitored chamber. The breathing stopped. Vance's instruments recorded 17 minutes and 43 seconds of complete stillness, no air movement whatsoever, beginning approximately 12 seconds after a team member raised their voice above normal conversational volume. The team had been discussing equipment calibration, nothing unusual. When they fell silent, confused by the sudden change in air pressure against their eardrums, the breathing resumed. They tested it again and again. 9 separate trials over 2 weeks produced the same result. Elevated vocal volume triggered respiratory cessation. The precise duration varied slightly, between 15 and 19 minutes, but the pattern held. "It's like the cave is listening," said Marcus Delgado, a graduate student who assisted with the study. "And when we get too loud, it holds its breath." Park officials were skeptical. Dr. Raymond Whitfield, then Director of Cave Resources for Arizona State Parks, reviewed Vance's data and concluded that the phenomenon was likely caused by acoustic interference with sensitive measurement equipment. He recommended recalibrating the sensors and repeating the study under more controlled conditions. Vance disagreed. She submitted a formal request to expand her research, proposing a 6-month continuous monitoring project that would include seismic sensors and ground-penetrating radar. The request was denied. Budget constraints, she was told. The cave's primary mission was conservation and public education, not speculative atmospheric research. Vance resigned from the project in 2005. Her monitoring equipment was removed. The data she collected, nearly 4 years of continuous readings, was archived but never published in peer-reviewed form. When contacted by a journalist in 2011, she declined to discuss her findings, saying only that she had moved on to other work, but others had not moved on. In 2009, a maintenance worker named Thomas Riley reported an incident that never appeared in official logs. Riley had been conducting a routine inspection of the cave's climate control systems, working alone in a section closed to the public. According to a statement he later gave to an independent researcher, he began humming to himself while checking a humidity gauge, an unconscious habit, nothing more. The breathing stopped. Riley did not know about Vance's research. He did not know about the 17-minute intervals. What he knew was that the air in the passage suddenly felt heavier, as if the pressure had increased, and that the silence was so complete he could hear his own heartbeat. He stopped humming. He stood motionless for what he estimated was 10 minutes, though he had no way to verify this. Eventually, he felt a soft rush of warm air against his face. The breathing had resumed. "I've worked in caves for 20 years, Riley said. "I've never felt anything like that. It wasn't scary exactly. It was more like recognition, like something knew I was there, and it was waiting to see what I would do next." Riley requested a transfer to surface operations shortly afterward. His request was granted without comment. Today, Kartchner Caverns receives over 100,000 visitors annually. Tour groups are led through illuminated passages, shown the ancient formations, told the story of Tufts and Tennant's discovery. The breathing phenomenon is mentioned briefly, attributed to barometric differentials, treated as a quirk of geology rather than a mystery worth investigating. But the guides know the rule, even if they don't discuss it openly. Keep your groups quiet in the deep sections. Don't let anyone shout. Don't let anyone sing. Because sometimes when the breathing stops, it doesn't start again right away. Sometimes it waits, and no one has ever documented what happens if it waits too long. Dr. Vance's archived data was requested through a Freedom of Information Act filing in 2018. The request was partially fulfilled. Most of the sensor readings were included along with calibration logs and equipment specifications. Missing from the archive were all recordings from the 2-week period when the vocal response tests were conducted. The gap was attributed to a filing error. The cave still breathes, 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, steady as a heartbeat. Visitors feel it against their skin, a warmth that seems almost welcoming, almost alive. Most of them never think to raise their voices, and those who do rarely speak about what they noticed in the silence that followed. Someone had been living there, and then, without explanation, no one had. Lava River Cave cuts through the volcanic rock of northern Arizona like a wound that never healed. Located approximately 22 miles northwest of Flagstaff, within the boundaries of Coconino National Forest, the cave stretches nearly a mile beneath the surface, a lava tube formed roughly 700,000 years ago when molten basalt flowed from a now dormant volcanic vent, cooled on the outside while the interior continued moving, eventually draining and leaving behind a hollow passage through solid stone. The Coconino Plateau where the cave sits rises to an elevation of nearly 7,000 feet, blanketed by ponderosa pine forests that thin into high desert scrubland as you travel south. Winters here are harsh. Temperatures regularly drop below zero, and snow accumulates in drifts that can persist into May. The landscape is deceptive. What appears flat and navigable from a distance reveals itself up close as fractured terrain riddled with fissures, sinkholes, and collapsed lava tubes that can swallow a person without warning. The Navajo and Hopi peoples have inhabited the surrounding region for centuries, though oral history suggests they avoided the volcanic fields near what is now the cave's location. The Navajo word sometimes associated with the area translates roughly to where the ground swallowed the fire, though ethnographers have debated whether this refers to the volcanic geology or something else entirely. Spanish explorers passed through in the 1700s, noting the Black Rock country in their journals, but showing little interest in detailed exploration. American settlers arrived in the 1880s, drawn by timber and railroad opportunities, and by 1900, the cave had been officially mapped, though officially meant little more than a pencil line on a survey chart and a note indicating subterranean passage, approximately 1 mile, no commercial value. The cave remained largely forgotten until the Great Depression brought federal surveyors back to the Arizona wilderness. In August of 1932, the Bureau of Land Management dispatched a 4-person team to conduct comprehensive surveys of undeveloped federal lands in Coconino County. The work was part of a broader New Deal initiative to catalog public resources and identify potential sites for civilian Conservation Corps projects. The team was led by Harold Ostrowski, a 43-year-old geologist from the University of Michigan, and included surveyor Ruth Blackwood, cartographer Samuel Ferreira, and field assistant Leonard Yazzie, a Navajo man from Tuba City who served as guide and interpreter. Their instructions were straightforward. Document terrain features, note evidence of human activity, and assess potential for development or conservation. Lava River Cave appeared on their itinerary as a minor stop, a geological curiosity worth a few hours of examination at most. What they found required 3 days to document. According to Ostrowski's field report, submitted to the Bureau on September 14th of that year, the team entered the cave at approximately 9 in the morning on August 23rd. The entrance, a collapsed section of the lava tube ceiling, required a descent of roughly 20 feet using rope ladders. Inside, they found what Ostrowski described as unmistakable evidence of sustained human habitation. The evidence included 14 wool blankets arranged on the cave floor in what appeared to be sleeping configurations, a cast-iron cook stove of early 20th century manufacture still containing ash, 7 pairs of children's shoes, sizes ranging from toddler to approximately age 10, arranged in a neat row against one wall, ceramic dishes stacked beside a natural rock shelf, 3 kerosene lanterns, empty but functional, and a wooden crate containing approximately 40 pounds of dry goods, flour, sugar, salt, and coffee beans. All items appeared to have been placed deliberately, carefully. Nothing was scattered or disturbed. The blankets showed no signs of hasty departure. Most striking was what the team did not find: people. The site presented itself as if the occupants had stepped away momentarily and intended to return, Ostrowski wrote. No decomposition was evident among food stores, no rodent activity despite presence of flour and grain products. Lanterns were upright and positioned near sleeping areas. Shoes were paired and oriented facing the cave entrance, as one would place them beside a bed. Ruth Blackwood, in her own supplementary notes, added a detail that did not appear in the official report. The children's shoes were polished, not merely clean, polished, as if for church or a formal occasion. I counted 7 pairs. I could not stop counting them. The team spent 2 days photographing and cataloging the site. Leonard Yazzie, according to later interviews, refused to enter the cave after the first day, remaining at the surface entrance and declining to explain his reasons. When pressed by a journalist in 1958, he said only, "Some places are waiting rooms. You don't stay in a waiting room after the appointment is missed." Samuel Ferreira, the cartographer, produced detailed drawings of the cave's interior, including the precise arrangement of belongings. His sketches showed something the photographs did not clearly capture. The items were arranged in a semicircle, all facing a blank section of the cave wall approximately 40 feet from the entrance. There was nothing unusual about the wall itself, no markings, no opening, no geological features of note. But everything faced it. The Bureau's response to Ostrowski's report was, by all accounts, measured. A memorandum dated October 3, 1932, acknowledged receipt of the findings and authorized a follow-up inspection to determine if occupants have returned and to assess any public health or trespassing concerns. The memorandum was signed by Regional Director Franklin Morse, who added a handwritten note in the margin: "Unusual. Proceed with caution. Document everything." The follow-up team, reduced to 2 surveyors, neither of whom had participated in the original expedition, entered Lava River Cave on November 19, 1932. They found nothing. The official report from this second visit, filed December 2nd, described a cave, showing no evidence of human activity beyond minor litter consistent with occasional recreational use. No blankets, no cook stove, no children's shoes, no kerosene lanterns, no wooden crate. The photographs from August showed clearly identifiable features: a distinctive rock formation near the entrance, a natural pillar approximately 300 feet in. That confirmed both teams had surveyed the same location. The items had simply ceased to be there. No removal was documented. No tracks in the dust suggested transport. The second team noted that accumulated debris near the entrance, pine needles, small stones, animal scat, appeared undisturbed, as if no one had entered or exited in months. Ostrowski, contacted by the Bureau for clarification, submitted a sworn statement reaffirming his original observations. Ruth Blackwood did the same. Samuel Ferreira provided his original sketches, which clearly depicted items that no longer existed. The Bureau's response was to close the file. A Freedom of Information Act request in 1987 produced the complete documentation of the 1932 surveys, including both field reports, all photographs, and internal correspondence. Missing from the archive was any record of follow-up investigation, any attempt to identify the item's owners, or any inquiry into missing persons who might have matched the evidence, children, apparently, among them. Coconino County Sheriff's records from 1932 show no reports of missing families during the summer or fall months. State Health Department archives contain no documentation of disease outbreaks or evacuations in the area. Railroad company records indicate no unusual traffic patterns. Census data from 1930 lists no households in the immediate vicinity of the cave. Whoever had been living there, preparing food, arranging their children's shoes each night, facing some unremarkable wall as if waiting for it to open, was not, according to any official record, supposed to exist at all. Leonard Yazzie died in 1971. In his final years, he reportedly told family members that he had dreamed about the cave periodically throughout his life. Always the same dream, always the same details. In the dream, he said, he entered the cave and found everything exactly as the team had documented it in August of 1932. The blankets, the cook stove, the shoes in their neat row. But in the dream, the people were there too. They were sitting in their semicircle, facing the wall, silent and motionless. They did not turn when he entered. They did not speak. They simply waited, as they had always waited, as perhaps they were still waiting. And the wall they faced, in the dream, was no longer blank. It was open. In one chamber of Colossal Cave, your echo arrives before your voice does. Colossal Cave Mountain Park lies 22 miles southeast of Tucson, Arizona, nestled in the foothills of the Rincon Mountains where the Sonoran Desert begins its slow climb toward higher elevation. The cave itself is a dry limestone formation, technically classified as inactive, meaning water no longer flows through its passages to create new formations. What remains is a fossil, a geological memory of processes that ended roughly 20,000 years ago when the regional water table dropped and left the chambers to silence and stillness. The Hohokam people knew of this place. Archaeological evidence suggests they used the cave's entrance as shelter as far back as 900 years ago, though no artifacts have been recovered from the deeper passages. Spanish missionaries documented the cave's existence in the 1700s, calling it La Cueva Grande, and noting that local indigenous guides refused to venture past the first chamber. American settlers rediscovered the cave in 1879, and by the turn of the century, it had developed a reputation as a hideout for bandits, train robbers, cattle thieves, and outlaws seeking shelter in its constant 53-degree darkness. The cave became a public attraction in 1923, one of Arizona's first commercial caves. Visitors descended into the mountain by candlelight, later by electric lamp, guided through passages with names like Crystal Forest, Kingdom of the Elves, and Silent River. The tours followed the same route for decades, and generations of guides learned the same script, the same jokes, the same carefully timed pauses for dramatic effect. But some guides learned something else, something they did not include in the official tour. The first documented mention of the acoustic anomaly appears in a 1953 letter from tour guide Dolores Montalvo to her sister in Nogales. The letter, donated to the Pima County Historical Society in 2008, describes an incident during a routine afternoon tour. "We were in the crystal room, the one with the formation that looks like a wedding cake," Montalvo wrote. "I was explaining the geology to a family from Ohio when the father interrupted me. He asked if there was another tour group nearby. I told him no, we were alone in that section. He said he had just heard a woman say exactly what I was about to say, word for word, but her voice came before mine. His wife heard it too. Their daughter was crying. I finished the tour early." Montalvo worked at Colossal Cave for 17 years. In her letter, she mentioned that the incident in the crystal room was not unique. Other guides have told me similar things, she wrote. We don't discuss it with management. We don't discuss it with visitors. We just move through that chamber a little faster than we used to. By the 1970s, the phenomenon had acquired an unofficial name among longtime staff, the forward echo. The term appeared in a handwritten maintenance log from 1974, discovered during a records digitization project in 2015. The entry, attributed to facilities manager George Trujillo, reads, Tour 3 reported forward echo incident in Crystal Room, 8th this month. Recommend acoustic survey. See previous requests. No acoustic survey was conducted. Margaret Lindqvist was a graduate student in acoustic physics at the University of Arizona when she first heard about Colossal Cave's anomaly in 1985. Her doctoral advisor, Dr. Put Ramesh Venkataraman, had received an informal inquiry from a park administrator asking whether the university might be interested in studying unusual sound propagation in the cave. Venkataraman declined, citing lack of funding. Lindqvist pursued the project on her own time. I expected to find nothing, Lindqvist said in a 2012 interview with Arizona Public Media. Caves have strange acoustics, sound bounces. People mishear things. I thought I would spend a weekend with a microphone and a notepad and write a short paper debunking local folklore. She spent 3 months. Lindqvist's initial recordings, made in February of 1986, captured standard acoustic phenomena: reverberation, standing waves, frequency-dependent absorption by limestone walls. The Crystal Room showed nothing unusual in preliminary analysis. But during her 4th visit in March of that year, something changed. I was recording ambient sound levels, speaking into the microphone to establish a baseline, Lindqvist recalled. I said, Test recording Crystal Room, March 15, 1986, approximately 2 p.m. When I played it back, there was a second voice, a woman's voice. It said the same words I said, but it started approximately 1.3 seconds before I did. Lindqvist initially assumed equipment malfunction. She replaced her recorder, her microphone, her cables. She conducted the same test 17 more times over the following weeks. In 11 of those tests, the forward voice appeared. The voice was always female. It always spoke the exact words Lindqvist would speak, including spontaneous remarks she had not planned or scripted. In one recording from April 1986, Lindqvist can be heard saying, I think I dropped my pen. The forward voice says the same thing, in the same cadence, approximately 1.1 seconds earlier. Lindqvist's handwritten notes from that session indicate she had not realized she dropped her pen until she spoke the words aloud. The voice knew what she would say before she knew she would say it. Lindqvist's most disturbing recording came in October of 1987. She had invited a colleague, Dr. Paul Okoro, from the university's Cognitive Science Department to observe her methodology and offer an outside perspective. Okoro stood in the Crystal Room while Lindqvist operated recording equipment from an adjacent passage. On the tape, Okoro can be heard clearing his throat and beginning to speak. My name is Paul Okoro, and I am... A woman's voice interrupts him. It says, participating in an acoustic study at Colossal Cave Mountain Park on behalf of the University of Arizona. The time is 4:17 p.m., and I am standing approximately 30 feet from the entrance to the Crystal Room. Okoro had not yet decided what he would say. He later confirmed that he had intended to give his name and department affiliation, nothing more. The forward voice completed his introduction with information he had not planned to include, and completed it correctly. I stopped the recording, Lindqvist said. Paul was pale. He asked me how long this had been happening. I told him I didn't know. I told him I wasn't sure it was happening at all, in any way I could explain. Lindqvist submitted her findings to 3 academic journals between 1988 and 1991. All 3 rejected the papers, citing methodological concerns and lack of reproducibility under controlled conditions. One reviewer noted that the recordings could not be authenticated against tampering, and suggested Lindqvist consider alternative explanations, including fabrication. She left academia in 1993. Her recordings were preserved on magnetic tape and later digitized, but the original equipment was lost during a laboratory relocation. Colossal Cave's management never formally acknowledged her research. Dr. Okoro, when contacted for this report, confirmed that he participated in Lindqvist's study, but declined to discuss the specific recording. "I heard what I heard, he said. "I have no explanation for it. I have chosen not to speculate." The Crystal Room remains on the standard tour route. Guides still pause there to explain the geology, to point out formations, to make the same jokes they have made for decades. Visitors still occasionally report hearing something strange, a voice that seems to come from nowhere, that seems to say what they were about to say. Park management still attributes these reports to overlapping tour groups, but the tour schedule shows that groups are never less than 15 minutes apart, and the Crystal Room has only one entrance. Dolores Montalvo died in 2003 at the age of 87. In her final years, according to family members, she refused to discuss her time at Colossal Cave. When her granddaughter asked why, Montalvo reportedly said, "Because I spent 17 years listening to something that knew what I would say before I said it, and I never once heard it speak for itself." She paused, her granddaughter recalled, then added, "I don't think it was an echo. I think it was a warning. I just never figured out what it was warning us about." The Crystal Room is approximately 53 degrees year-round. Silence there between tour groups is absolute. And sometimes, if you listen carefully before you speak, you can hear yourself finishing a sentence you haven't started yet. Every year, on the same night, someone holds a meeting in a cave that no one can enter. Cave of the Bells lies deep in the Santa Rita Mountains, approximately 45 miles south of Tucson in the Coronado National Forest. The cave takes its name from the delicate formations inside, thin, hollow stalactites that produce a faint ringing tone when air currents pass through the chambers. It is considered one of the most significant caves in Arizona, containing over 3 miles of mapped passages and formations that took millions of years to develop. It is also one of the most difficult to access. The entrance is a vertical pit, roughly 60 feet deep, requiring rope work and specialized equipment to descend. The drop is sheer, the walls slick with moisture from underground springs. Below the entrance pit, the cave branches into a labyrinth of passages, some requiring crawling through spaces barely wide enough for a human body, others opening into chambers large enough to hold a small church. There is no path a casual hiker could follow. There is no way in without training, equipment, and determination. The Santa Rita Mountains themselves are remote, accessible only by rough forest roads that become impassable during monsoon season. The nearest town is Sonoita, a small ranching community of fewer than 1,000 residents. The land surrounding the cave is a mix of national forest and private ranch holdings, some owned by the same families for over a century. It is not a place people visit casually. It is barely a place people visit at all. The O'odham and Apache peoples have stories about the Santa Ritas, stories that predate Spanish contact, stories that speak of gatherings held in places beneath the earth where certain matters were decided by those who were no longer living. These stories were recorded by ethnographers in the early 1900s, but have never been connected to Cave of the Bells specifically. The connection, if one exists, remains speculative. The first documented report of unusual activity near the cave came in December of 1961. Ernesto Padilla, a third-generation rancher whose family had worked land adjacent to the national forest since 1892, was checking fence lines on the evening of December 14th when he noticed light coming from the direction of the cave. Padilla later described it to the Pima County Sheriff's Office as lantern light, not flashlight, yellow, flickering, like kerosene. He estimated he was approximately a quarter mile from the cave entrance at the time. Padilla did not investigate. He was 63 years old, alone, and the terrain between his position and the cave was treacherous even in daylight. He returned home and mentioned the sighting to his wife, who suggested he had seen headlights from a distant vehicle reflected off rock formations. Padilla accepted this explanation and did not report the incident officially until several years later, when he learned he was not the only one who had seen the lights. In 1965, another rancher named Dorothy Swenson reported seeing similar illumination on December 14th. Swenson's property was 3 miles east of Padilla's, offering a different angle on the cave's location. She described a soft glow, like someone was holding a lantern just inside the opening. Swenson mentioned the sighting to neighbors at a holiday gathering, where she learned that Padilla had reported the same phenomenon 4 years earlier. By 1970, at least 7 ranchers in the area had independently reported seeing light from the cave on December 14th. The sighting spanned nearly a decade and came from witnesses who had no reason to coordinate their accounts. All described the same characteristics: yellow light, flickering, visible for several hours, beginning around midnight and fading before dawn. No one reported seeing people enter or exit the cave. No one reported vehicles or equipment being transported into the area. No one could explain how anyone could access a vertical cave entrance at night in winter without leaving evidence of their presence. "I've been ranching these mountains my whole life," Padilla told a reporter from the Tucson Citizen in 1971. "I know what headlights look like. I know what campfires look like. That wasn't either. That was inside the cave. And there's no way to get inside that cave without gear I would have noticed being hauled up the mountain." Dorothy Swenson offered a more measured assessment. "I don't know what I saw," she said. "I know when I saw it. December 14th, every time. I stopped checking after a while. I figured if something wanted to meet in that cave once a year, it wasn't any of my business." The Pima County Sheriff's Office received its first formal inquiry about the lights in 1971, following the Tucson Citizen article. Deputy Raymond Kowalczyk was assigned to investigate. His report, filed January 3, 1972, remains the only official law enforcement document addressing the phenomenon. Kowalczyk visited the cave site on December 15, 1971, the morning after the most recent reported sighting. He arrived at the cave entrance at approximately 7 in the morning, accompanied by a Forest Service ranger named Michael Begay, who had technical climbing experience. What they found defied easy explanation. According to Kowalczyk's report, he and Begay descended into the cave using rope and harness equipment. The entrance pit was undisturbed. No marks on the walls, no evidence of recent rope use, no footprints in the mud surrounding the opening. At the bottom of the pit, they followed the main passage approximately 200 feet into the cave. There, in a chamber roughly 40 feet in diameter, they found 43 folding chairs. The chairs were arranged in semicircular rows, 4 rows deep, all facing a natural rock formation on the chamber's far wall. They were metal-framed with canvas seats, consistent with models manufactured in the 1920s and 30s. Several bore faded labels from a furniture company in Phoenix that had gone out of business in 1941. Every chair was covered in a uniform layer of dust. "The dust was undisturbed," Kowalczyk wrote in his report. "No handprints, no marks suggesting recent use. The chairs appeared to have been in place for years, possibly decades. There was no indication anyone had sat in them recently, or ever." Begay, the forest ranger, took photographs of the chamber. These photographs were included in Kowalczyk's report, but have since been removed from the official file. A Freedom of Information Act request in 2003 produced the written report, but noted that attached photographic materials could not be located. Kowalczyk's report concluded with a recommendation for follow-up investigation, including an inventory of the chairs and an attempt to trace their origin. No follow-up was conducted. The file was marked inactive in February of 1972. The chairs were never removed. In 1978, a group of recreational cavers from the University of Arizona received a permit to map previously unexplored sections of Cave of the Bells. Their expedition, conducted in August of that year, included a visit to the chamber Kowalczyk had described. The chairs were gone. The team's leader, a geology graduate student named Sandra Fleischman, noted in her expedition report that the chamber showed no evidence of the furniture described in the 1972 sheriff's report. The floor was bare limestone, undisturbed. The dust was uniform. There were no marks, no depressions, nothing to suggest 43 chairs had ever occupied the space. Fleischman contacted Kowalczyk, who had retired from the sheriff's office in 1975. He confirmed his original observations and expressed surprise that the chairs had been removed. "I don't know how anyone could have gotten them out," he said. "I don't know how anyone got them in." December 14, 1978, was the last reported sighting of lights from Cave of the Bells. Dorothy Swenson, who had watched for them every year since 1965, reported that the cave remained dark that night. She watched until dawn. Nothing appeared. No one has reported the lights since. The ranchers who witnessed the phenomenon are mostly gone now. Padilla died in 1984, Swenson in 1997. Their accounts remain in local newspaper archives and the incomplete sheriff's file. The chairs have never been found. The photographs have never been recovered. Cave of the Bells is still there, still requiring technical equipment to enter, still holding its 3 miles of passages and its formations that ring like bells when the air moves through them. And every December 14th, the few people who know the story still wonder, who were they? What were they deciding? And why, after all those years of meeting in a place no one could reach, did they finally stop coming? The cave offers no answers. It only waits, silent, 60 feet below a vertical entrance that shows no signs of ever being used. Seven caves in southern Arizona are not where the maps say they are, and all of them are wrong in exactly the same way. Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument sprawls across 330,000 acres of Sonoran Desert along the Arizona-Mexico border, a landscape of volcanic mountains, bajadas, and ancient lava flows that most Americans will never see. The monument was established in 1937 to protect one of the most pristine examples of Sonoran Desert ecology remaining in the United States. But its remoteness has always served another purpose: obscurity. This is borderland in the truest sense, a place where jurisdictions blur, where surveillance is difficult, where the terrain itself resists easy passage or observation. The desert here is not empty, despite appearances. Beneath the creosote flats and saguaro forests lie dozens of caves and lava tubes, remnants of volcanic activity that shaped the region millions of years ago. Most are small, insignificant, documented only in geological surveys conducted decades ago and rarely visited since. The terrain discourages casual exploration. Summer temperatures exceed 115 degrees. Water sources are scarce and unreliable. The nearest town, Lukeville, has a population of fewer than 50 permanent residents. The Tohono O'odham Nation, whose reservation borders the monument to the east, has inhabited this region for thousands of years. Their relationship with the caves is complex and largely unspoken. Ethnographic records from the early 20th century mention ceremonial sites beneath the stone, but specific locations were never disclosed to researchers. When asked about the caves in more recent decades, tribal elders have generally declined to comment, citing cultural protocols that prohibit discussion of sacred geography with outsiders. Pinta Dome Cave is a small lava tube located in the monument's northwestern quadrant, approximately 12 miles from the Mexican border. It was first officially documented in a 1943 geological survey conducted by the United States Army Corps of Engineers as part of wartime resource mapping. The survey assigned the cave coordinates, placing it at 32 degrees, 4 minutes, 17 seconds north latitude by 112 degrees, 51 minutes, 8 seconds west longitude. These coordinates point to empty desert. There is no cave there. There never was. The actual cave sits approximately 1.8 miles northeast of the documented position, a discrepancy discovered in 2008 by Dr. Teresa Mulligan, a geomorphologist from Northern Arizona University, conducting fieldwork on volcanic formations in the monument. Mulligan had been using the 1943 survey as a reference guide, cross-checking historical documentation against modern GPS equipment. When she arrived at the coordinates listed for Pinta Dome Cave, she found nothing but creosote bush and decomposed granite. Assuming a transcription error, she expanded her search radius and eventually located the cave nearly 2 miles away. "My first thought was simple human error," Mulligan said in a 2010 interview with the Arizona Geological Society. "Coordinates get transposed, decimal points shift, it happens, but when I checked the original survey documents, the coordinates were recorded correctly. They just didn't match the actual location." Mulligan might have dismissed the discrepancy as an isolated mistake if she hadn't noticed something else in the 1943 survey. 6 other caves in southern Arizona were documented in the same report, all surveyed during the same 3-month period by the same Army Corps team. On a hunch, she checked their coordinates as well. All 6 were wrong. All 6 were offset by approximately the same distance, between 1.7 and 1.9 miles, in the same direction, southwest. "That's not a pattern consistent with random error," Mulligan noted. "That's a pattern consistent with deliberate modification." The caves in question span 3 separate mountain ranges: the Ajo Mountains within Organ Pipe, the Growler Mountains to the north, and the Cabeza Prieta Range to the west. They are unrelated geologically. Some are lava tubes, others are limestone solution caves. One is a collapsed mine shaft that predates American territorial control. The only thing connecting them is the 1943 survey and the identical displacement of their recorded positions. Mulligan's discovery attracted limited attention initially. She presented her findings at a regional geology conference in 2009, where the response ranged from mild interest to skepticism. Dr. Howard Latimer, a cartographic historian from the University of Arizona, offered what became the most commonly accepted explanation: the displacement was likely an artifact of wartime security protocols. During World War II, the military routinely altered geographic data on sensitive installations, Latimer explained. Airfields, ammunition depots, radar stations, anything that might be targeted by enemy reconnaissance was shifted on maps to confuse potential attackers. It's possible these caves were modified for similar reasons, though I couldn't tell you why caves in the middle of the Arizona desert would warrant that treatment. The military security theory satisfied most researchers, but it did not satisfy Mulligan. She filed a Freedom of Information Act request in 2010, seeking the original survey field notes and any correspondence related to the 1943 mapping project. The request was partially fulfilled in 2012. The documents she received included survey team rosters, equipment inventories, and expense reports. Missing were all field notes, site photographs, and internal communications. A cover letter from the National Archives indicated that certain materials related to the survey had been transferred to restricted classification in 1947 and remained inaccessible. The classification upgrade occurred 4 years after the survey was completed and 2 years after the war ended. Mulligan attempted to trace the survey team members, hoping to find personal records or family correspondence that might explain the coordinate modifications. The team leader, Captain William Driscoll, died in 1951 in a car accident outside Phoenix. The 3 enlisted surveyors, Sergeant Manuel Espinoza, Corporal Theodore Johansson, and Private First Class Albert Whitehorse, all left military service within 18 months of the survey's completion. None pursued careers in geology or cartography. None left written accounts of their work in southern Arizona. Albert Whitehorse was Navajo, one of the few indigenous servicemen assigned to geological survey work during the war. His military service file, obtained through a separate records request, contains an unusual notation dated March 1944. Requested reassignment from survey duties. Request granted. No disciplinary action. The file does not indicate why Whitehorse requested the transfer or why it was approved without the standard waiting period. Whitehorse died in 1983 on the Navajo Reservation near Window Rock. His family declined interview requests regarding his military service, citing privacy concerns. A nephew, speaking anonymously to a journalist in 2015, said only, "My uncle didn't talk about the caves. He said some places shouldn't be found easily. He said the people who moved them on the maps knew what they were doing." The caves themselves remain largely unexplored. Pinta Dome Cave is small, fewer than 200 feet of accessible passage, and contains no formations of significant interest. The other 6 caves in the displaced group are similarly unremarkable. Short passages, minimal formations, no evidence of historical use or archaeological significance. And yet someone in 1943 made certain they would not be found where they actually existed. Mulligan continued researching the discrepancy until her retirement in 2019. She never published a formal paper on her findings, citing insufficient evidence to support any definitive conclusion. In her final interview on the subject, she offered an observation that has lingered with those who followed her work. "I've spent 40 years studying how the earth shapes itself," she said. "Caves form where water meets stone, where pressure finds release, where time does its slow work. They don't move, they don't shift. They are where they are, exactly where geology placed them millions of years ago." She paused, looking at the topographic map spread across her desk, the one showing 7 caves in positions they did not occupy. But someone wanted these caves to be somewhere else, not destroyed, not sealed, not removed from the record entirely, just relocated, on paper, as if the goal wasn't to hide them completely, but to make sure anyone looking would arrive at the wrong place first. She folded the map carefully. "I've always wondered what they were supposed to find at the wrong place, and what they were being kept from finding at the right one." The coordinates in the 1943 survey have never been corrected. The caves remain officially documented in positions they do not occupy. And somewhere in the Arizona desert, 7 holes in the earth sit quietly in locations that, according to every official map, do not exist. For 22 years, a man recorded numbers that should not have changed, and every August they did. Grand Canyon Cavern sits along Old Route 66 in northwestern Arizona, approximately 220 feet below the surface of the Colorado Plateau. Despite its name, the cave has no direct connection to the Grand Canyon itself, lying nearly 60 miles south of the famous gorge. The caverns were discovered in 1927 when a woodcutter named Walter Peck nearly fell into a funnel-shaped depression while searching for gold. What he found instead was a dry limestone cave system containing the largest dry cavern in the United States, a chamber so vast that the United States government once considered it as a potential fallout shelter during the Cold War, capable of holding 2,000 people for up to 2 weeks. The cave maintains remarkable environmental stability. At 210 feet below the surface, external weather has almost no effect on internal conditions. The humidity holds steady near 50%. Air circulation is minimal, regulated only by the pressure differential between the cave's single elevator entrance and a few natural fissures that connect to the surface. Most significantly, the temperature in the deepest accessible chamber remains constant at 56 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, regardless of whether the Arizona desert above is baking at 115 degrees or dusted with winter frost. This stability is what makes caves useful for scientific study. It is also what makes deviations from that stability so difficult to explain. The Hualapai people, whose reservation lies north of the caverns, have oral traditions concerning underground places in the region. Passages, they say, connect the surface world to something deeper. These traditions are not shared freely with outsiders, and the specific relationship between Hualapai beliefs and Grand Canyon caverns has never been formally documented. What is known is that early guides at the cave, some of whom were Hualapai, referred to the deepest chamber as the waiting room, though none would explain what visitors were supposed to be waiting for. Marcus Thibodeau began working at Grand Canyon Caverns in 1987. He was 34 years old, a former electrician from Kingman who had taken the maintenance position after a workplace injury left him unable to continue his previous trade. His job was unglamorous. Check the elevator, replace light bulbs, monitor the ventilation system, ensure the pathways were safe for the tours that descended several times daily. Thibodeau was also, by nature, a record keeper. He logged everything: equipment inspections, visitor complaints, supply inventories. And beginning in January of 1989, he began recording the temperature in the cave's deepest chamber, a space called the Chapel of the Ages, twice daily, once at 6 in the morning before tours began, and once at 10 at night after the last visitors had departed. For the first 7 months, his records showed exactly what geologists would predict: 56 degrees every reading, with variations of less than half a degree that could be attributed to instrument tolerance. The cave was stable. The cave was constant. The cave was behaving exactly as a cave should. Then August arrived. On August 3, 1989, Thibodeau's morning reading showed 41 degrees. He assumed his thermometer was malfunctioning and retrieved a backup from storage. The backup confirmed the reading. By his evening check, the temperature had dropped further to 39 degrees. The following morning, it had returned to 41 and held there. For 17 days, from August 3rd through August 19th, the Chapel of the Ages maintained a temperature 15 degrees below its established baseline. On August 20th, the morning reading returned to 56 degrees, as if nothing had happened. Thibodeau reported the anomaly to management. He was told that underground rivers could cause temperature fluctuations and that his instruments probably needed calibration. He purchased new thermometers with his own money, 3 different brands, 1 digital and 2 analog. He placed all 3 in the Chapel of the Ages and recorded their readings independently. August of 1990 produced the same result: 17 days of 41 degrees beginning August 4th. All 3 thermometers agreed. "I thought I was going crazy the first year," Thibodeau said in a 2009 interview with a regional newspaper. "The second year, I knew something was real. By the 10th year, I stopped trying to convince anyone and just kept writing it down." The cold spells were not the only anomaly Thibodeau documented. Beginning in 1992, he noticed a correlation between the temperature drops and the cave's bat population. Grand Canyon Caverns is not a significant bat habitat. The single artificial entrance and dry conditions make it unsuitable for most species. Typically, Thibodeau might observe 3 to 5 bats roosting in the upper passages during his daily rounds. Small brown bats, occasionally a pallid bat. Nothing remarkable. During the August cold spells, the bat population increased dramatically. Thibodeau counted them carefully, marking their roosting positions on a hand-drawn map of the cave. During the 1993 cold period, he documented 17 bats on August 5th, rising to 43 by August 12th, then declining to 8 by August 20th when temperatures returned to normal. The pattern repeated annually, with populations during the cold spell averaging between 30 and 50 individuals, roughly 10 times the normal cave population. More disturbing than the numbers was their apparent origin. Bats navigate by echolocation and memory, Thibodeau wrote in his personal notes from 1997. They know their roots. They return to the same roosts. These bats weren't coming through the elevator shaft. I would have seen them. They were emerging from the back passages, from fissures too small for a person to enter, and the guano deposits suggested they were coming from deep inside, from directions that shouldn't lead anywhere except more rock. He plotted the back passages on a map and extended their trajectories. If the fissures continued in straight lines, which they likely did not, they would emerge somewhere in the vicinity of caves near Flagstaff, over 200 miles to the east. Dr. Evelyn McCready, a wildlife biologist at Arizona State University, reviewed Thibodeau's bat documentation in 2004 at his request. Her assessment was cautious but intrigued. The population numbers are unusual but not impossible, McCready wrote in her response. Bats are mobile, and underground cave networks can extend farther than surface maps suggest. What I find harder to explain is the synchronicity with temperature changes. Bats seek consistent microclimates. They should avoid a roost that experiences a 15-degree temperature swing. Instead, these animals appear to be drawn to it, arriving when it begins and departing when it ends. That implies either a navigational mechanism we don't understand or a destination that exists only during those 17 days. McCready proposed a joint study with the cave's management in 2005. The proposal was declined, with ownership citing concerns about disruption to tour operations during peak season. She was offered access during October or November instead, months when, according to Thibodeau's data, neither the temperature anomaly nor the bat influx occurred. McCready never conducted the study. Thibodeau retired in 2011 after 24 years at Grand Canyon Caverns. His temperature logs filled 14 spiral notebooks, documenting over 16,000 individual readings. He donated the notebooks to the Mojave Museum of History and Arts in Kingman, where they remain in the archival collection but have never been formally analyzed or published. His final entry, dated December 15, 2011, reads, 56 degrees, Chapel of the Ages, everything normal. But I keep thinking about those 17 days. Every August, something changes, something opens, and things that live underground know about it before we do. I don't know what they're coming for. I don't know what they find when they get there. I only know they keep coming back. The current maintenance staff at Grand Canyon Caverns does not keep temperature logs. Management has stated that modern climate control systems make such manual documentation unnecessary. No formal study of the August temperature anomaly has ever been conducted, but the cave is still there, 210 feet below the Arizona desert, holding steady at 56 degrees for most of the year. And every August for 17 days, something in the Chapel of the Ages changes. A cold that arrives without explanation, that draws creatures from distances that should be impossible, that ends exactly when it began. The bats still come. No one counts them anymore. No one records where they emerge from or where they go when the cold recedes. And the waiting room, if that is what it is, continues to wait. The handprints on the wall are 10,000 years old, and they are getting younger. Ventana Cave lies in the Castle Mountains of southern Arizona, within the boundaries of the Tohono O'odham Nation, approximately 90 miles west of Tucson. The cave is a rock shelter rather than a true cave, a shallow overhang carved by wind and water into volcanic tuff over millions of years. It faces south, opening onto a vast expanse of Sonoran desert that stretches unbroken toward the Mexican border. The shelter has provided refuge for humans for at least 11,000 years, making it one of the longest continuously occupied sites in North America. The Tohono O'odham people, whose name translates to desert people, have maintained a presence in this region since long before European contact. Their relationship with Ventana Cave is complex, tied to ancestral narratives that are not shared with outsiders. The cave's name itself is Spanish, meaning window, though the O'odham have their own name for the site, one that appears in no published records and is spoken only in ceremonial contexts. Archaeological excavations at Ventana Cave began in 1941 under the direction of Emil Haury of the University of Arizona. The work continued intermittently for decades, yielding some of the most significant prehistoric artifacts ever recovered in the American Southwest. Stone tools, animal bones, plant remains, and evidence of human occupation spanning from the Ice Age to the historic period. The cave's dry conditions preserved materials that would have decayed elsewhere, creating a record of human presence that few sites can match. Among the most striking features of Ventana Cave are the pictographs, images painted on the shelter's walls in red and yellow ochre, some depicting animals in geometric patterns, others consisting of human handprints pressed directly onto the stone. These handprints have been dated to approximately 8,000 to 10,000 years before present, making them among the oldest known rock art in the region. In the summer of 1964, a team from the Arizona State Museum conducted a comprehensive photographic survey of Ventana Cave's pictographs as part of a preservation assessment. The team was led by Dr. Helena Sorensen, a rock art specialist who had spent 15 years documenting prehistoric imagery across the Southwest. Her goal was to create a baseline record of the pictograph's condition, against which future deterioration could be measured. Sorensen's photographs were meticulous. She used standardized lighting, consistent camera angles, and included measurement scales in each frame. She numbered each handprint individually, 37 in total, and recorded detailed notes on their color saturation, edge definition, and any visible damage from weathering or biological growth. The handprint showed typical degradation patterns, Sorensen wrote in her 1965 report: fading, consistent with ultraviolet exposure, minor flaking at the edges, some biological incrustation. I estimated that at current deterioration rates, significant details would be lost within 50 to 75 years. The photographs were archived at the Arizona State Museum, where they remained largely undisturbed for over 3 decades. In 1998, a preservation team returned to Ventana Cave to assess the pictograph's condition and determine whether intervention was needed to prevent further degradation. The team included Dr. Franklin Uribe, a conservator from the National Park Service, and Dr. Nadia Kovalenko, a material scientist specializing in pigment analysis. They brought Sorensen's original photographs for comparison. What they found did not match the expected deterioration. "I assumed there had been a labeling error," Uribe said in a 2003 interview with Archaeology Southwest magazine. The photographs showed handprints that were clearly more faded, more degraded than what we were seeing on the wall. I thought perhaps Sorensen had photographed a different section of the cave. She had not. Kovalenko confirmed the match using measurement scales visible in both the 1964 photographs and the current site conditions. The handprints were in the same positions, the same configurations, the same relative sizes, but they were not in the same condition. They were better. The ochre pigment appeared denser, more saturated than the 1964 baseline, Kovalenko reported. Edge definition had improved. Areas that showed flaking in the original photographs now presented intact surfaces. By every metric we use to assess rock art preservation, these images had reversed their deterioration. The team spent 4 days documenting the discrepancy, taking new photographs under conditions that matched Sorensen's original methodology as closely as possible. They collected microscopic samples from areas adjacent to the handprints, never from the images themselves, for laboratory analysis. They checked their equipment repeatedly, suspecting calibration errors or lighting artifacts. The results were consistent. The handprints had grown fresher over 34 years. Dr. Sorensen, contacted by Uribe in 1999, reviewed the comparative photographs and confirmed that her original documentation was accurate. "I don't have an explanation," she said in a letter to the research team. "I documented what I saw in 1964. You documented what you saw in 1998. Both records appear to be accurate. I don't know how both can be true." The Tohono O'odham Nation, which maintains jurisdiction over Ventana Cave and all research conducted there, was informed of the findings. Tribal Historic Preservation Officer Gabriel Francisco met with the research team in February of 1999 to discuss the results. According to Uribe's notes from that meeting, Francisco listened to the presentation without comment, examined the comparative photographs, and then asked a single question. "Did you touch the wall?" Uribe confirmed that standard protocols had been followed. No direct contact with the pictographs, samples taken only from adjacent areas. Francisco nodded. "That's good," he said. "The wall would have remembered." When pressed for clarification, Francisco declined to elaborate. He said only that the O'odham understanding of the cave was different from the archaeological understanding, and that some walls remember forward, not backward. He recommended that further research be conducted only with explicit tribal approval and cultural oversight. No further research has been approved. The 1998 findings were never formally published. Uribe prepared a preliminary report for the National Park Service, but the document was classified as internal review only and has not been released to academic journals. Kovalenko's pigment analysis was included in a broader study of ochre chemistry published in 2004, but the Ventana Cave data was presented without location identifiers or reference to the temporal anomaly. Scientific explanations have been proposed, though none have been formally investigated. Mineral deposition from groundwater seepage could theoretically enhance pigment saturation, though no evidence of active water flow was found at the site. Biological factors, lichens, bacteria, algal growth, typically degrade rock art rather than preserve it. Atmospheric changes in dust accumulation patterns might alter apparent color density, but would not explain improved edge definition or repaired flaking. Dr. Kovalenko, in private correspondence obtained by a journalist in 2010, offered a more speculative observation. "We assume that time moves in one direction and that entropy applies uniformly. The handprints at Ventana Cave suggest that assumption may not hold in all contexts. I don't know what that means. I'm not sure I want to know." The handprints remain on the wall of Ventana Cave, protected by tribal jurisdiction and the cave's remote location. No comparative study has been conducted since 1998. No one has documented whether the reversal has continued, accelerated, or stopped. Helena Sorensen died in 2007 at the age of 89. In her personal effects, her family found a note paperclipped to the 1964 Ventana Cave photographs. It read, "37 hands pressed against stone 10,000 years ago. They are fading." I documented it. But now I wonder, fading toward what? Into what? Or out of what? The Odom do not discuss Ventana Cave with outsiders. And the handprints, whoever made them, whatever they meant, wherever they are going, continue to wait, pressed against stone that remembers in directions we do not understand. Something beneath Vulture Mine was humming at a frequency that should only exist in the sky. Vulture Mine sits in the Sonoran Desert approximately 60 miles northwest of Phoenix, near the town of Wickenburg. The mine was established in 1863 after prospector Henry Wickenburg discovered a gold-bearing quartz outcrop that would become one of the richest strikes in Arizona history. Over the following decades, the mine produced an estimated $200 million in gold, a staggering sum that fueled the development of the entire region. By 1942, the veins had been exhausted, and the mine was abandoned, leaving behind a network of tunnels that extended over 2,000 feet below the desert surface. The landscape above ground is harsh and unforgiving. Temperatures regularly exceed 110 degrees in summer. Water is scarce, vegetation sparse, the terrain broken by arroyos and rocky outcrops that offer little shade and less comfort. The mine's surface structures, head frames, ore bins, company offices, have largely collapsed or been removed, leaving only foundations and scattered debris to mark where hundreds of men once worked and, in some cases, died. At least 18 miners were killed at Vulture Mine during its operational years, most in accidents involving cave-ins, equipment failures, or the extreme heat. Local legend holds that some bodies were never recovered, left entombed in collapsed sections of the tunnel network. Whether true or not, the mine has long carried a reputation among Wickenburg residents as a place best avoided after dark. The Yavapai and Maricopa peoples, whose ancestral territories encompass this region, have their own stories about the land beneath the mine. These stories predate the gold rush by centuries and speak of places underground where the earth speaks in tones too low for human ears. The specific relationship between these oral traditions and Vulture Mine has never been formally studied. Dr. Samuel Nwosu arrived at Vulture Mine in March of 1997 as part of a joint research project between Arizona State University and the United States Geological Survey. The project's stated goal was to study microseismic activity in abandoned mine environments, using Vulture Mine's extensive tunnel network as a natural laboratory for testing new detection equipment. Nwosu was a geophysicist, specializing in subsurface monitoring, with particular interest in the faint vibrations generated by groundwater movement, tectonic stress accumulation, and other processes invisible to conventional observation. His team included 3 graduate students, Diana Marchetti, Robert Ansa, and Yuki Tanabe, along with a Geological Survey liaison named Patricia Holbrook. They deployed 12 seismograph stations throughout the accessible portions of the mine, ranging from near-surface levels to the deepest safely navigable shaft at approximately 800 feet. The equipment was sensitive enough to detect a truck passing on a highway 3 miles away. For the first 4 months, the data showed exactly what Nwosu expected: minor vibrations from distant traffic, occasional rumbles from commercial blasting at active mines in the region, and the subtle tremors that accompany any underground environment as rock settles and adjusts to pressure changes. Nothing unusual, nothing unexpected. Then, in July of 1997, the station at the deepest shaft began recording something else. At first, I thought it was equipment malfunction, Nwosu said in a 2001 interview with Earth Sciences Quarterly, the only publication where he discussed the findings. The signal was too clean, too consistent. Natural seismic events don't look like that. They're chaotic, variable. This was a pure tone. The tone registered at 7.83 hertz, a frequency that carries particular significance in geophysics. 7.83 hertz is the fundamental frequency of the Schumann resonance. the electromagnetic phenomenon generated by lightning activity in the cavity between Earth's surface and the ionosphere. It is, in a sense, the planet's electromagnetic heartbeat, maintained by the continuous discharge of lightning strikes around the globe. But the Schumann resonance is an atmospheric phenomenon. It exists in the space above the Earth, not below it, and the signal Nwosu's equipment detected was not electromagnetic. It was mechanical, a physical vibration traveling through rock. Something beneath the mine was producing a sound wave at the same frequency as the sky. Diana Marchetti, then a second-year graduate student, was responsible for analyzing the raw seismograph data. She spent 3 weeks verifying the readings, cross-checking against equipment specifications and environmental variables. The signal was definitely coming from below us, Marchetti recalled in a 2008 podcast interview. Not from the surface, not from lateral sources, from deeper in the earth, below the lowest point we could access. And it wasn't constant. It had a rhythm to it, like breathing. Long, slow cycles of intensification and diminishment, approximately every 47 minutes. Robert Ansah, another team member, described his impression of the sound when the seismograph data was converted to audio format. It was below human hearing range, obviously. We had to pitch shift it up to make it audible. When we did, it sounded like, I don't know how to describe it, like something very large and very far away, humming to itself. Not musical exactly, more like machinery, but organic somehow. The team continued monitoring for 12 additional months through the summer of 1998. The 7.83 Hz signal persisted throughout this period, present on every recording from the deepest station, absent from all shallower stations. Whatever was producing it was localized to a point beneath the mine's lowest accessible level. In October of 1997, the team made an observation that would eventually end the project. Patricia Holbrook, the Geological Survey liaison, was reviewing data logs when she noticed an anomaly. The signal's intensity appeared to fluctuate not just on 47-minute cycles, but also in correlation with human activity in the mine. Specifically, the hum grew stronger when researchers were present underground and speaking to one another. I thought it was coincidental at first, Holbrook said in a statement provided to this investigation. Environmental noise, equipment interference, something mundane. But Sam had us test it systematically. We would enter the deep shaft, remain silent for 30 minutes, then begin a normal conversation. The signal intensified within 90 seconds of us speaking, every time. The correlation held across 23 controlled tests conducted between October 1997 and February 1998. Silence produced baseline readings. Conversation produced amplification. The effect was not dependent on volume. Whispered speech triggered the same response as normal conversation. It was dependent on content. The signal intensified most dramatically when we discussed the signal itself, Nwosu noted in his final project report. When we talked about other subjects, personal matters, unrelated research, even other aspects of the mine, the amplification was moderate. When we talked about the 7.83 Hz tone, the amplification was pronounced. It was as if something was paying attention. The project was scheduled to continue through December of 1998. In March of that year, funding was abruptly terminated. Nwosu's final report, submitted to both Arizona State University and the United States Geological Survey, documented all findings including the speech correlation effect. The report was accepted, filed, and never published. A Freedom of Information Act request in 2012 produced a heavily redacted version in which all references to the 7.83 Hz signal had been removed. No explanation for the redactions was provided. The cover letter stated only that certain data had been classified as geologically sensitive under provisions that had never before been applied to academic seismological research. Nwosu left Arizona State University in 1999 for a position at a private research firm in Colorado. He has not conducted underground research since. Marchetti completed her doctorate but shifted her focus to surface geology. Ansa left academia entirely. Holbrook retired from the Geological Survey in 2003. Tanabe, the fourth graduate student, declined all interview requests. A colleague who spoke on condition of anonymity said that Tanabe had returned to the deep shaft alone in February 1998, 2 weeks before the project's termination, intending to collect a final set of recordings. She was down there for about 4 hours, the colleague said. When she came back up, she wouldn't talk about what she'd recorded. She erased the data herself. All she said was that the hum had changed while she was listening. It had started to form patterns. She said it sounded like it was trying to say something, and she said she didn't want to know what. Vulture Mine remains closed to public access, protected by fencing and private security. The tunnel network continues to settle, occasionally producing minor surface collapses that make headlines in local newspapers. Somewhere beneath the Arizona desert, 800 feet down, and deeper still, something may still be humming at 7.83 hertz, the frequency of the sky emanating from the earth. And if anyone is listening, it may be listening back. David Pressler went into a cave for 8 hours and came out 7 weeks later, unchanged in every way except one. He remembered things that never happened. Onyx Cave lies in the Chiricahua Mountains of southeastern Arizona, a small limestone formation approximately 15 miles from the town of Portal. The Chiricahuas are an isolated range, separated from neighboring mountains by broad valleys of grassland and desert scrub. They rise abruptly from the surrounding terrain, reaching elevations above 9,000 feet, their upper slopes covered in pine and fir forests that seem misplaced in the Arizona landscape. The mountains were homeland to the Chiricahua Apache, whose resistance to American expansion lasted until 1886. The terrain that sheltered Geronimo and his warriors for decades continues to shelter other things: canyons that receive no sunlight, rock formations that defy easy mapping, and caves that have never been fully explored. Onyx Cave is not among the region's larger or more famous caverns. It extends approximately 400 feet into the mountainside, a single main passage with 2 modest chambers and no known connections to other cave systems. The cave was surveyed in 1951 by the Arizona Geological Society and again in 1968 by a University of Arizona field team. Both surveys produced consistent maps showing unremarkable limestone formations, minor stalactite development, and no features of particular scientific interest. The cave's accessibility made it a useful training site for geology students learning survey techniques. The terrain was challenging enough to be instructive, but not dangerous enough to require extensive safety protocols. Students could practice their mapping skills in a real underground environment within a few hours' drive of Tucson. David Pressler was 23 years old in September of 1983, a second-year graduate student in the University of Arizona's Department of Geosciences. His academic focus was karst hydrology, the study of how water moves through limestone landscapes, and he had chosen Onyx Cave as the site for a practice survey that would help prepare him for more ambitious fieldwork planned for the following summer. He departed Tucson on the morning of September 12th, driving alone. His faculty advisor, Dr. Martin Eichhorn, expected him to return by September 14th at the latest. The survey was routine, the cave was well documented, and Pressler was an experienced caver who had logged over 200 hours underground during his undergraduate years. He did not return on September 14th. The Cochise County Sheriff's Office initiated a search on September 16th, after Pressler failed to respond to phone calls and missed 2 scheduled meetings. His vehicle was located at the Onyx Cave trailhead the following day, undisturbed, with camping equipment still packed in the trunk. Search teams entered the cave on September 18th and found no sign of Pressler, no equipment, no footprints in the cave's dusty floor, no indication that anyone had been inside recently. The search expanded to include the surrounding wilderness, operating on the assumption that Pressler had changed his plans and hiked into the backcountry. Over the following 6 weeks, teams covered more than 40 square miles of rugged terrain. They found nothing. On October 29, 1983, 47 days after Pressler's departure from Tucson, a ranger named Consuelo Medrano was conducting a routine patrol near the Onyx Cave trailhead when she observed a man walking out of the cave entrance. It was David Pressler. Medrano's incident report, filed that evening, describes what she observed. Subject appeared alert and oriented. He was carrying survey equipment consistent with geological fieldwork. His clothing was clean and showed no signs of extended wear. He expressed confusion when informed of the current date, stating repeatedly that he had entered the cave this morning and had been inside for about 8 hours. Subject showed no signs of dehydration, malnutrition, exposure, or physical distress. Pressler was transported to the Cochise Regional Medical Center in Douglas, where he underwent comprehensive examination. His physical condition was consistent with his own account. He appeared to have experienced approximately 8 hours of normal activity. His blood chemistry was normal. His weight had not changed from his last recorded measurement. His beard growth suggested he had shaved that morning, though his razor was still packed in his vehicle. "There was no medical explanation for what we were seeing," said Dr. Patricia Onyango, the attending physician who examined Pressler that evening. A person cannot go 47 days without food or water and present the way he did. But there was also no evidence he had been anywhere else. His clothes were the same ones his roommate confirmed he had been wearing when he left Tucson. His equipment showed no signs of being used over an extended period. Whatever happened to him, it did not happen in the way time normally passes. Pressler himself was cooperative, but increasingly confused as the implications of his situation became clear. He submitted to repeated interviews with sheriff's deputies, university officials, and eventually a psychologist retained by the university. His account remained consistent throughout. He had entered Onyx Cave at approximately 9 in the morning on September 12th. He had spent the day surveying the main passage and 2 chambers, taking photographs, collecting measurements, and recording observations in his field notebook. He had encountered no difficulties, experienced no injuries, noticed nothing unusual. He had exited the cave at approximately 5 in the afternoon, intending to camp nearby and complete additional work the following day, except it was no longer September 12th, it was October 29th. The field notebook Pressler carried added another layer of complexity to an already inexplicable situation. Dr. Eichhorn reviewed the notebook with Pressler present on November 3, 1983. The notes were detailed and professional, showing exactly the kind of systematic observation expected from a graduate student conducting survey work. But the cave they described did not match Onyx Cave. He had documented formations that don't exist, Eichhorn said in a 1991 interview with a journalist researching unexplained incidents in Arizona. Flowstone deposits in locations where the cave walls are bare limestone, a third chamber that no survey has ever identified. Measurement notations referencing Station 7 and Station 12 when Onyx Cave has only 2 established survey stations. Most troubling were references scattered throughout the notes to other people. "Confirmed bearing with Hendricks at Station 4, read one entry. Morrison suggests Eastern Passage may connect to lower system. We'll investigate tomorrow. Lunch break at noon. Team consensus to focus afternoon efforts on flowstone documentation. Pressler had entered Onyx Cave alone. No one named Hendricks or Morrison was associated with the university's geology program. No team had been dispatched to accompany him. When confronted with these discrepancies, Pressler became distressed. He remembered writing the notes. He remembered the conversations with his teammates. He remembered formations he had photographed and measurements he had recorded. But when he looked at his own photographs, all time-stamped September 12, 1983, spanning approximately 7 hours, they showed empty cave passages, bare walls, and the familiar features documented in previous surveys. The photographs showed Onyx Cave as it actually existed. The notes described somewhere else entirely. Pressler withdrew from the university in January of 1984, citing personal reasons. He relocated to New Mexico, where he worked for a private environmental consulting firm until his death in 2009. He never returned to Onyx Cave. He never conducted underground field work again. His field notebook was retained by Dr. Eichhorn and eventually donated to the university's archive of student materials. A researcher who examined the notebook in 2015 noted that several pages appeared to have been removed. Clean cuts near the binding suggested deliberate excision rather than accidental loss. What those pages contained and who removed them remains unknown. The 47 days have never been explained. Medical professionals could not account for Pressler's physical condition. Search teams could not explain how they missed him if he remained in the cave the entire time. Psychologists could not reconcile his coherent, detailed memories with the documented reality. Consuelo Medrano, the ranger who found Pressler emerging from the cave, offered the only observation that those who studied the case found genuinely unsettling. "When I first saw him walking out just for a second, I thought I saw other people behind him," she said in a 2003 interview. "Shadows, maybe, shapes in the cave entrance. I blinked and they were gone, and it was just him standing there looking confused. I put it down to the light playing tricks, but sometimes I wonder." She paused before continuing. "He was alone when he went in. He was alone when he came out, but I'm not sure he was alone in between." Onyx Cave remains open to experienced cavers with appropriate permits. The passage extends 400 feet into the mountain, 2 chambers, no unexplained formations. No third passage, no evidence that anything unusual has ever occurred there. And yet, somewhere in a university archive, a notebook describes a different cave entirely, one with teammates who never existed, formations that were never there, and 47 days that passed in what felt like an afternoon. David Pressler never forgot those colleagues he worked alongside. He remembered their voices, their suggestions, their presence beside him in the darkness. He just could never find them again. The thermal camera showed people standing in the darkness, people who were not there. Ramsey Canyon lies in the Huachuca Mountains of southeastern Arizona, approximately 6 miles south of the town of Sierra Vista. The canyon is renowned among naturalists as one of the most biologically diverse locations in North America. A narrow riparian corridor where species from the Rocky Mountains, the Sierra Madre, and the Sonoran Desert converge. Over 400 species of birds have been documented here. 14 species of hummingbirds visit the canyon during migration season. The Nature Conservancy has maintained a preserve in the Upper Canyon since 1974. Less well known are the caves. The Huachuca Mountains are riddled with limestone formations dating back millions of years, when this region lay beneath a shallow sea. As the waters receded and the mountains rose, acidic groundwater carved passages through the soft rock, creating a network of caves that has never been fully mapped. Most are small, insignificant, known only to hikers who stumble upon their entrances. A few are larger, extending hundreds of feet into the mountainside. Ramsey Canyon Cave is one of these larger formations. It sits approximately 2,000 feet above the canyon floor, accessible only by a steep trail that sees minimal traffic. The cave entrance is partially concealed by vegetation, easy to miss if you don't know where to look. Inside, the main passage extends roughly 300 feet before branching into several smaller chambers. The temperature holds steady near 55 degrees year-round. The cave is home to a significant colony of Mexican long-tongued bats, a species of conservation concern that migrates to southern Arizona each summer to feed on agave nectar. These bats roost in the cave's deepest chambers during daylight hours, emerging at dusk to forage in the surrounding highlands. Dr. Amara Okonkwo began studying the Ramsey Canyon bat colony in the summer of 2014. She was a wildlife ecologist affiliated with the University of Arizona's School of Natural Resources and the Environment, specializing in the behavior and conservation of nectar-feeding bats. Her research required extended observation periods in the cave, documenting roosting patterns, colony size, and interactions between individual animals. By 2016, Okonkwo had upgraded her equipment to include thermal imaging cameras capable of recording in complete darkness. The cameras detected infrared radiation, heat, and translated it into visible images. Warm objects appeared bright against cooler backgrounds. The technology allowed her to observe bat behavior without disturbing the animals with visible light. On the night of August 14, 2016, Okonkwo positioned 2 thermal cameras in the cave's main roosting chamber, approximately 250 feet from the entrance. She activated the cameras at 7 in the evening and left the cave, intending to retrieve the equipment the following morning. The cameras recorded for approximately 12 hours. When Okonkwo reviewed the footage on August 15th, she found what she expected: hours of bat activity, animals clustering on the ceiling, shifting positions, eventually departing through the cave entrance as night fell. Standard footage, scientifically useful, unremarkable. Then she noticed the figures. At 2 hours, 17 minutes into the recording, approximately 9:17 in the evening, 3 distinct heat signatures appeared in the lower right corner of the frame. They were humanoid in shape, bipedal, standing motionless against the cave wall. Their thermal profiles indicated temperatures consistent with living human bodies, several degrees warmer than the surrounding rock. They remained visible for approximately 40 minutes before fading from the image. My first thought was that hikers had entered the cave without my knowledge, Okonkwo said in a 2018 interview with a regional environmental journal. I had left the entrance unmarked, and it's possible someone could have wandered in. But when I checked the entrance footage from my secondary camera, no one entered or exited the cave during that time window. The figures appeared from nowhere. They disappeared to nowhere. They just stood there watching. Okonkwo reported the anomaly to her faculty colleagues, several of whom reviewed the footage and confirmed that the heat signatures were genuine, not artifacts of camera malfunction or image compression. Dr. Lewis Harrington, a physicist with expertise in thermal imaging, examined the original files and concluded that the figures displayed temperature gradients consistent with metabolic heat generation, suggesting biological origin. But no one had been in the cave. More disturbing than the visual anomaly was what emerged when Okonkwo enhanced the audio track. Thermal cameras record audio through integrated microphones, primarily to capture ambient sounds that might correlate with animal behavior. Okonkwo had rarely paid attention to the audio from her recordings. Bat vocalizations occur at frequencies largely above human hearing range, and the cave was otherwise silent. The audio from August 14th was not silent. Beginning at approximately the same timestamp as the thermal figure's appearance, faint voices could be heard on the recording. They were low, indistinct, partially obscured by the soft rustle of bat wings, but unmistakably human. Okonkwo amplified the audio and filtered out background noise. What remained was a conversation. I couldn't understand it at first, Okonkwo recalled. It sounded like Spanish, but wrong somehow. The rhythm was different. Some of the words didn't match any Spanish I knew. She shared the audio with Dr. Isabella Ferreira, a linguist at the University of Arizona specializing in indigenous languages of the American Southwest and northern Mexico. Ferreira's analysis, completed in November of 2016, identified the speech as a hybrid dialect. Approximately 60% of the vocabulary derives from colonial-era Spanish, Ferreira wrote in her assessment. The remaining 40% consists of terms I cannot definitively classify. Some bear resemblance to Opata, a language formerly spoken in Sonora that has been extinct since the early 20th century. Others match no recorded language in my database. The grammatical structure is unlike any documented speech pattern in the region. Ferreira was able to transcribe portions of the conversation, though much remained unclear. The clearest passage, occurring approximately 18 minutes after the voices first appeared, translated roughly as, "They watch from above. They have always watched. The warmth reveals us. Soon the warmth will bring them too." A second voice, fainter and more distant, responded, "Let them come. We have been waiting." Okonkwo submitted her findings to the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, which administered permits for research in the Ramsey Canyon area. Her report included thermal footage, enhanced audio files, and Ferreira's linguistic analysis. She requested authorization to conduct additional observation with upgraded equipment. The request was denied. A letter dated February 2017 informed Okonkwo that her research permit would not be renewed for the upcoming season. The stated reason was administrative restructuring of cave access protocols. No further explanation was provided. Appeals to the regional director and the Nature Conservancy, which maintained the surrounding preserve, were unsuccessful. Ferreira's linguistic analysis was submitted to 3 academic journals between 2017 and 2019. All 3 rejected the paper, citing concerns about unverifiable source material and speculative interpretation. The audio files were eventually uploaded to an online repository of linguistic curiosities, where they have been downloaded over 12,000 times but never formally studied. Okonkwo continued her bat research at other sites throughout southern Arizona. She has not returned to Ramsey Canyon Cave since 2016. The cave remains accessible to hikers who know where to find it. The bat colony still roosts in the deepest chambers each summer. No formal investigation of the thermal anomalies has ever been conducted. Local residents in Sierra Vista occasionally speak of Ramsey Canyon with caution, though most decline to be specific about their concerns. A retired Border Patrol agent named Victor Solano, who patrolled the Huachuca foothills for over 20 years, offered a comment that has circulated among those familiar with the incident. "People have been going into those caves for a long time," Solano said. "Not all of them were from around here. Not all of them were from any time we'd recognize. The mountains remember, the caves remember, and sometimes, if you bring the right equipment, you can see who else is still down there waiting." Okonkwo's thermal cameras were standard wildlife monitoring equipment designed to observe animals in their natural environment. They recorded heat signatures, nothing more, nothing less. But heat signatures require heat, and heat requires bodies. Somewhere in the footage, now archived on a university server, 3 figures stand against a cave wall, speaking a language that should not exist, watching something above them that watches back. The cameras saw them, the cameras heard them, and whatever they were waiting for, they may be waiting still. Some visitors come to Montezuma Well with questions and leave knowing things they never asked. Montezuma Well sits in the Verde Valley of central Arizona, approximately 90 miles north of Phoenix, a geological formation unlike anything else in the American Southwest. It is not a well in the conventional sense, but a collapsed limestone sinkhole, roughly 400 feet in diameter and 55 feet deep, filled with water that flows continuously from underground springs at a rate of nearly 1.5 million gallons per day. The water is warm, heavily mineralized, and supports a unique ecosystem found nowhere else on Earth, species of leeches, amphipods, and water scorpions that have evolved in isolation for thousands of years. The Sinagua people built cliff dwellings into the limestone walls surrounding the well over 800 years ago, structures that still cling to the rock today. Before them, other peoples came to this place, leaving behind artifacts that date back 11,000 years. The Yavapai and Apache nations, whose territories encompassed the Verde Valley in more recent centuries, consider the well sacred, a place of emergence where the first people climbed from the underworld into the light. They call it by names that are not shared with outsiders. Montezuma. Well became part of Montezuma Castle National Monument in 1947, administered by the National Park Service and visited by approximately 300,000 people annually. Most visitors spend 15 to 20 minutes at the site, a walk down the trail, a look at the water, a photograph, and departure. The viewing platform offers a spectacular vista, and the interpretive signs explain the geology and history in accessible terms. But some visitors stay longer, and some of those visitors leave with more than they brought. The first documented reference to unusual experiences at Montezuma Well appears in the Ranger Station log from July 1973. A park ranger named Douglas Whitehorse noted that a visitor, a retired school teacher from Flagstaff named Barbara Lundquist, had approached him in a state of calm distress after spending approximately 2 hours sitting near the water's edge. According to Whitehorse's entry, Lundquist reported that she had been thinking about her estranged daughter when the thought completed itself. She had been wondering whether her daughter was happy, a question she had asked herself many times without answer, when suddenly she knew. Her daughter was pregnant. Her daughter had not told her. Her daughter would call within the week. Whitehorse noted the report, but took no action. 6 days later, Lundquist returned to the monument and sought him out. Her daughter had called. She was pregnant. She had been waiting for the right moment to share the news. "I didn't know what to make of it," Whitehorse said in a 1989 interview with a journalist researching sacred sites of the Southwest. People have spiritual experiences at places like this. It's not unusual, but she wasn't describing a vision or a feeling. She was describing information, specific, accurate information that she had no way of knowing. Whitehorse began keeping informal records of similar reports. By the time he transferred to another park in 1981, he had documented over 40 incidents of visitors reporting completed thoughts or answered questions after extended time at the well. Most involved personal matters, health of family members, outcomes of pending decisions, events that had not yet occurred. A significant minority proved verifiable after the fact. Dr. Janet Okafor encountered the phenomenon in 1998 while conducting research on visitor experiences at National Park sacred sites. Okafor was a psychologist at Northern Arizona University studying the psychological effects of landscape on human cognition, how certain environments influence mood, creativity, and perception. Montezuma Well was one of 12 sites she surveyed that year. The initial data was unremarkable, Okafor said in a 2004 presentation at a regional psychology conference. Visitors reported feelings of peace, contemplation, connection to history, standard responses to heritage sites. But when I isolated subjects who had spent more than 90 minutes at the water's edge, a different pattern emerged. Of the 47 extended-duration visitors Okafor interviewed, 11 reported experiences consistent with the completed thought phenomenon. 6 of those 11 described receiving specific information about future events. 4 of the 6 allowed Okafor to follow up with them 3 months later. All 4 reported that the information they received had proven accurate. Okafor expanded her research in 2001, conducting a formal survey of 214 visitors who had spent at least 90 minutes at Montezuma Well over a 12-month period. The results were published in an obscure regional journal of environmental psychology and received no mainstream attention. 23% of respondents reported intrusive knowledge experiences, thoughts that arrived complete without the normal process of reasoning or memory retrieval. 12% reported that the knowledge concerned events that had not yet occurred at the time of their visit. Of those who could be contacted for follow-up, 68% confirmed that the anticipated events had taken place as known. The numbers were troubling, Okafor admitted. Statistically, they should not be possible. Coincidence couldn't explain the accuracy rate. Confirmation bias couldn't explain the specificity. Something was happening at that location that I couldn't account for using any model I had been trained to apply. The National Park Service was informed of Okafor's findings in 2002. The response was measured and bureaucratic. A memorandum from the Regional Director's Office acknowledged the research and recommended continued monitoring of visitor experiences as part of standard interpretive operations. No formal investigation was authorized. More telling was what happened to Okafor's subsequent research. In 2003, she submitted a proposal to the Park Service requesting permission to conduct controlled studies at Montezuma Well, including extended observation sessions and real-time psychological assessments. The proposal was denied on grounds of potential disruption to site integrity and visitor experience. She appealed. The appeal was denied. She submitted a modified proposal reducing the scope of her research. It was also denied. By 2005, Okafor had shifted her research to other sites. Her 2001 survey remained the only formal study of the phenomenon ever conducted. The regional journal that published her findings ceased publication in 2008. The article is no longer available through standard academic databases. The Yavapai Apache Nation, whose reservation borders the monument, has never commented publicly on the research. When contacted by journalists over the years, tribal representatives have consistently declined to discuss Montezuma Well's spiritual significance with non-indigenous researchers. One elder, speaking anonymously to a documentary filmmaker in 2012, offered a single observation. The well knows things. It has always known things. White people think knowledge flows one direction, from the past to the present. The well knows that time is a circle. What will happen has already happened. The water remembers forward. Montezuma Well continues to receive hundreds of thousands of visitors each year. Most spend 15 to 20 minutes at the site. Most leave with nothing but photographs and memories. But some stay longer. Some sit at the water's edge, watching the surface ripple from the springs far below, and find themselves thinking about questions they have carried for years. Questions about family, about choices, about what will happen next. And some of them, more than statistics can explain, stand up knowing the answers. They do not remember learning them. They do not remember asking. They simply know, with a certainty that feels like memory, things that have not happened yet. The water is warm. The water is ancient. The water flows at a rate of nearly 1.5 million gallons per day, emerging from somewhere deep in the earth, carrying minerals and dissolved limestone, and perhaps something else, something that has been answering questions for 11,000 years, whether or not anyone was ready to hear. The Sinagua built their homes around the well. The Yavapai and Apache considered it sacred. And visitors today, if they stay long enough, sometimes leave knowing things about their futures that they will spend years trying to forget. The well does. Not ask what you want to know. It simply tells you, and what it tells you is always eventually true. The bones were human, but the minerals inside them had never existed on this planet. Tonto Natural Bridge State Park lies in the pine forests of central Arizona, approximately 10 miles north of the town of Payson. The park protects what is believed to be the largest natural travertine bridge in the world, a massive arch of calcium carbonate spanning 400 feet and rising over 180 feet above Pine Creek. The bridge formed over thousands of years as mineral-rich spring water deposited layer upon layer of calcium, creating a structure that seems almost architectural in its scale and precision. The surrounding terrain is rugged and ancient. The Mogollon Rim rises to the north, a dramatic escarpment marking the edge of the Colorado Plateau. Caves and alcoves riddle the limestone cliffs throughout the region, some formed by the same mineral processes that created the bridge, others carved by water and time into the Paleozoic rock. Humans have inhabited this landscape for at least 10,000 years. The Tonto, Apache, and Yavapai peoples were living here when Spanish explorers arrived in the 16th century. Their ancestors left artifacts scattered throughout the caves and overhangs, stone tools, pottery fragments, and occasionally human burials that archaeologists have studied for over a century. It was this archaeological history that initially shaped the response to what workers found in 1991. The discovery occurred on April 17th of that year during a routine trail improvement project. A maintenance crew was widening an access point near the bridge's southeastern approach, using hand tools to clear brush and remove loose rock from a slope that had become unstable following the previous winter's heavy rains. The crew foreman, a park employee named Raymond Delacroix, noticed what appeared to be bone fragments protruding from a shallow depression approximately 15 feet from the existing trail. Delacroix halted work immediately and contacted park administration. Standard protocol for potential archaeological finds required notification of the Arizona State Museum and cessation of all ground-disturbing activities. By the following morning, a team from the museum had arrived to assess the site. Dr. Helen Vasquez, an osteologist specializing in prehistoric human remains of the Southwest, led the initial examination. Her preliminary report, filed April 19th, described partial skeletal remains of at least one individual appearing consistent with pre-contact Native American burial practices. The remains included portions of a skull, several vertebrae, a nearly complete pelvis, and fragments of long bones. The burial context suggested the individual had been interred deliberately, though no grave goods were immediately visible. Vasquez recommended full excavation under controlled archaeological conditions, with appropriate consultation with potentially affiliated tribal nations as required by federal law. The recommendation was approved. Excavation began on April 28th. What emerged over the following 2 weeks challenged everything the team expected to find. The morphology was clearly human, Vasquez said in a 2008 interview, her only public statement on the discovery. Skeletal structure, dental configuration, cranial capacity, all within normal range for Homo sapiens. If you had shown me photographs without context, I would have said we were looking at the remains of an adult male, approximately 30 to 40 years old at death, with no obvious signs of trauma or disease. But something was wrong with the bones themselves. Standard protocol for archaeological remains includes chemical analysis to determine preservation conditions and potential contamination. Bone samples were sent to the Arizona State University Archaeological Chemistry Laboratory in early May of 1991. The results arrived 3 weeks later. They made no sense. The mineral composition was anomalous, said Dr. Franklin Moravec, who conducted the initial analysis. We expect to see calcium, phosphorus, trace amounts of strontium, and zinc, the normal elements that accumulate in human bone tissue over a lifetime. These samples contained all of those, but they also contained something else. Trace amounts of elements that don't occur naturally in terrestrial bone. Elements that, frankly, shouldn't have been there at all. Moravec identified the anomalous compounds as ilmenite and armalcolite, minerals associated with basaltic rock. While ilmenite occurs on Earth, armalcolite is exceptionally rare, found primarily in high-temperature volcanic environments. It was first identified not on Earth but in samples collected during the Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969, and was named after astronauts Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins. The bones from Natural Bridge Cave contained armalcolite in concentrations that matched lunar regolith more closely than any terrestrial sample. I ran the analysis 4 times, Moravec said. I checked for contamination, instrument error, sample mislabeling. The results were consistent. Whatever this individual had been exposed to during their lifetime, it included mineral compounds that, to my knowledge, exist on Earth only in laboratories that study extraterrestrial materials. Moravec reported his findings to the Arizona State Museum in June of 1991. Within a week, the project was no longer under museum jurisdiction. A team from an agency Vasquez would only describe as federal arrived at the park on June 19th. They presented documentation authorizing transfer of the remains and all associated materials to a facility whose name was redacted from the paperwork Vasquez was shown. The excavation site was backfilled within 48 hours. Trail improvement work resumed, following a route that conveniently avoided the discovery location. I was told the remains had been identified as potentially connected to a federal investigation and that further inquiry by state or academic personnel was not authorized, Vasquez said. I asked what kind of investigation could involve archaeological remains. I did not receive an answer. The park's official records from April and May of 1991 contain no mention of skeletal remains, archaeological excavation, or any interruption to the trail improvement project. Maintenance logs indicate the work proceeded on schedule with no significant findings. Raymond Delacroix, the foreman who made the initial discovery, retired from Park Service in 1993 and declined interview requests until his death in 2011. Freedom of Information Act requests filed by independent researchers in 2003 and 2009 produced heavily redacted documents acknowledging that biological materials had been recovered from Tonto Natural Bridge State Park, but providing no details about their nature, analysis, or current location. Dr. Moravec's laboratory records from the relevant period were reported missing during a departmental audit in 1998. His analysis reports exist only in personal copies he retained, which he shared with a small number of researchers before his retirement in 2006. No scientific paper has ever been published about the remains. No museum holds them. No tribal nation has been consulted about repatriation because officially the remains do not exist. The Yavapai Apache Nation, contacted by a journalist in 2014, declined to comment on the discovery, but noted that their oral traditions speak of sky people who lived in the mountains before the current age of the world. These stories have never been formally recorded or analyzed in connection with the 1991 find. The trail at Natural Bridge Cave was completed in June of 1991 and remains in use today. Approximately 100,000 visitors walk it each year, passing within 20 feet of a location that may once have held remains that challenge fundamental assumptions about human history, biology, and our relationship to the world beyond this one. The bones are gone. The records are sealed. The questions remain. How did a human being, anatomically indistinguishable from any other person who has ever lived, come to contain minerals that form only in the vacuum of space or the depths of lunar basalt? When did they live? When did they die? And how did they come to rest in a shallow depression in an Arizona forest, buried like any other body, carrying inside them the chemical signature of a world 240,000 miles away? The bridge still stands, 400 feet of ancient stone spanning the canyon. The creek still flows beneath it. And somewhere, in a facility without a name, in records without a trace, the bones that weren't ours wait for answers that may never come. Or perhaps they wait for the questions to finally be asked by someone prepared to hear what they have to say. Ten people left their posts at the same moment, drove 50 miles in separate vehicles, and checked into the same motel without a single word passing between them. Meteor Crater lies in the high desert of northern Arizona, approximately 37 miles east of Flagstaff along Interstate 40. The crater is the best preserved impact site on Earth, formed approximately 50,000 years ago when a nickel-iron meteorite roughly 150 feet in diameter struck the Colorado Plateau at a speed of over 26,000 miles per hour. The resulting explosion, equivalent to roughly 10 megatons of explosive force, excavated a bowl nearly a mile wide and 570 feet deep. The rim rises 148 feet above the surrounding plain, a geological scar visible from space. The site was privately owned throughout the 20th century, operated by the Behringer family, who acquired it in 1903, hoping to mine the meteorite they believed lay buried beneath the crater floor. They never found it. The impactor had largely vaporized on contact, leaving only scattered fragments in the surrounding desert. What remained was the crater itself, and beneath it, a network of natural caves that formed in the fractured limestone underlying the impact zone. These caves were of significant scientific interest during the 1960s. The same forces that created the crater had also created an environment useful for studying shock metamorphism, high-pressure mineral formation, and the effects of violent deformation on subsurface rock. Beginning in 1963, a small research facility was established in the caves beneath the crater's eastern rim, accessible through a reinforced entrance tunnel and staffed by a rotating team of geologists, physicists, and support personnel. The facility operated without incident for 6 years. On March 3, 1969, at approximately 2:47 in the afternoon, all 10 people present in the underground facility stopped what they were doing and walked out. The team that day consisted of 7 researchers and 3 support staff. Dr. Harold Lindqvist, a mineralogist from the University of Colorado, was leading a survey of shock-deformed quartz samples in the lower chamber. Dr. Margaret Okonkwo, a physicist from Caltech, was calibrating instruments in the main laboratory. 5 other researchers, Dr. James Haruki, Dr. Sandra Bellini, Dr. Richard Sosi, Dr. Anna Kowalski, and Dr. Philippe Renaud, were engaged in various tasks throughout the facility. 3 support staff members, facility manager Victor Guerrero, technician Linda Yamamoto, and electrician Douglas Holbrook, were conducting routine maintenance. None of them were in communication with one another when they left. Security footage from the entrance tunnel, recovered during the subsequent investigation, shows all 10 individuals emerging from the facility in single file at 2:51 in the afternoon. They walk at identical speeds with identical posture, spacing themselves exactly 8 feet apart. None speaks. None looks at the others. They proceed to the surface parking area, enter their respective vehicles, and drive away. All 10 drove to Flagstaff. All 10 checked into the Frontier Motel on East Route 66. All 10 requested rooms on the second floor. All 10 remained in their rooms until the following morning, when facility security finally located them after a 16-hour search. None could explain what had happened. "I remember working on the court samples," Dr. Lindqvist said in his debriefing statement dated March 5, 1969. "Then I remember being in the motel room. It was dark outside. I had no idea how I got there. I couldn't remember leaving the facility, getting in my car, or driving. It was like waking up from a dream you can't quite recall." Similar accounts came from all 10 individuals. They remembered working. They remembered waking up in Flagstaff. The hours in between were simply gone. Dr. Okonkwo's statement included an additional detail that the others did not mention. "I had a sense of urgency," she said. "Not fear exactly. More like certainty. I knew I had to leave. I knew I had to go to that specific place. I didn't question it. It felt like the most natural thing in the world, like going home after a long day. Except I'd never been to that motel before in my life." Victor Guerrero, the facility manager, remembered one other thing. "When I got to the motel, the others were already there. I saw Dr. Haruki in the parking lot. We made eye contact. Neither of us said anything. It didn't occur to me to speak. It didn't occur to me that anything strange was happening. I just went to my room and closed the door." The security footage revealed 2 additional anomalies that were never explained. First, the timestamp on the recording showed all 10 individuals emerging at 2:51 in the afternoon, but the shadow positions in the footage did not match that time of day. At 2:51 in March, shadows at Meteor Crater should fall roughly northwest. The shadows in the footage fell directly toward the crater center, southeast, as if the sun had moved to a position it could not physically occupy. Second, Dr. Tsosi, the last person to emerge from the facility, appeared on camera 17 seconds after Dr. Renault, maintaining the 8-foot spacing. But facility logs showed that Tsosi had been working in the lower chamber over 200 feet from the entrance tunnel at 2:47 when the evacuation began. He could not have reached the exit in 4 minutes unless he had been running. He was walking at exactly the same speed as everyone else. The Barringer Crater Company, which owned the facility, conducted an internal investigation that concluded on April 22, 1969. The official finding attributed the incident to MAS, psychogenic response to unknown environmental stimulus. The report recommended improved ventilation and air quality monitoring, suggesting that an undetected gas release might have caused temporary cognitive impairment. No gas was ever detected. No equipment malfunction was identified. No environmental factor was found to explain how 10 people could simultaneously feel compelled to abandon their work, drive 50 miles, and converge on a single location without communication or conscious intent. The facility remained operational for 3 more years, closing in 1972 due to budget constraints rather than safety concerns. The entrance was sealed. The equipment was removed. The caves beneath Meteor Crater returned to darkness. The Frontier Motel was demolished in 1985 to make way for a shopping center. None of the former guests have returned to Flagstaff. Dr. Lindqvist retired in 1984 and died in 1997. Dr. Okonkwo left academia in 1971 and declined all interview requests until her death in 2008. Dr. Tsosi, the Navajo physicist who had been working in the lower chamber, never discussed the incident publicly. A colleague who spoke with him in 1982 reported that Tsosi said only, "Something called us out, something that knew the way. I don't think it was finished with us. I think it just decided to wait." The investigation files were transferred to the Barringer Family Archives following the facility's closure. A researcher who accessed the archives in 2014 noted that the original security footage was missing. only written descriptions of its contents remain. Meteor Crater continues to draw visitors today, over 200,000 annually. They walk along the rim, peer into the bowl, read the interpretive signs explaining how a rock from space reshaped this landscape 50,000 years ago. None of them visit the caves. The entrance was filled with concrete in 1973, 5 years before public tours began. Park literature makes no mention that a research facility ever existed there. And somewhere beneath the crater floor, in passages that have not seen light in half a century, whatever called 10 people out into the Arizona afternoon, whatever made them walk in perfect unison toward a destination none of them had chosen, waits in the fractured rock, patient as stone. The shadows fell wrong that day. The timing made no sense. And 10 people who had never met before that morning drove 50 miles to the same motel, checked into rooms on the same floor, and waited through the night for something that never came. Or perhaps it did come and simply found them not yet ready. The wait, after all, continues. The recording was 8 hours long when she left it, and 8 hours and 43 minutes long when she played it back. Sycamore Canyon lies in the heart of the Coconino National Forest, a 21-mile gash in the red rock country south of Flagstaff, Arizona. The canyon is often called the Little Grand Canyon, though it receives a fraction of the visitors. Its walls drop over 2,000 feet in places, carved by Sycamore Creek through layers of sandstone and limestone laid down hundreds of millions of years ago. The terrain is brutal and beautiful, impassable in many sections, prone to flash flooding, accessible only to those willing to earn every step. The canyon contains dozens of caves, most of them small alcoves and overhangs formed by erosion. A few extend deeper into the rock, carved by water along fault lines and through soluble limestone layers. These deeper caves are largely unmapped, visited only by experienced cavers willing to navigate miles of wilderness just to reach their entrances. The Yavapai people have lived in this region for centuries, and their oral traditions include references to the canyon as a place where time runs differently. Early Spanish explorers noted similar beliefs among indigenous guides, who reportedly refused to camp in certain alcoves after dark. A 1924 geological survey mentioned acoustic anomalies in several canyon caves, but provided no elaboration. The modern history of Sycamore Canyon is quieter. The area was designated a wilderness in 1972, prohibiting motorized access and preserving its isolation. Today, fewer than 1,000 people per year venture into the canyon's deeper sections. Those who do often report a sense of disorientation, difficulty tracking time, and occasional sounds that seem to have no source. Mariana Estrada was 34 years old in October of 2012, an experienced caver and amateur naturalist who had been documenting bat populations in central Arizona caves for nearly a decade. Her work was informal but meticulous. She maintained detailed records, used professional-grade equipment, and contributed data to several university research projects. She had explored over 60 caves in the region. Sycamore Canyon Cave 7, her own designation, as the cave had no official name, was a relatively minor site. She had first visited it in 2009 and returned annually to monitor a small colony of pallid bats that roosted in a chamber approximately 150 feet from the entrance. The cave was unremarkable, a single main passage, moderate humidity, no unusual formations. On October 14, 2012, Estrada entered the cave at approximately 3 in the afternoon, intending to document the bat colony's pre-hibernation behavior. She set up 2 audio recorders, one near the roost, one near the entrance, hoping to capture echolocation calls and movement patterns overnight. Both devices were voice-activated, designed to record only when sound exceeded a preset threshold. She left the cave at 4:30 and camped approximately a quarter-mile away. She retrieved the recorders the following morning. The entrance recorder showed nothing unusual. 6 hours and 42 minutes of intermittent recordings, mostly bat vocalizations, and the occasional rodent. Standard data. The deeper recorder was different. I noticed the discrepancy immediately, Estrada said in a 2015 interview with an independent audio research group. The device showed 8 hours and 43 minutes of total recording time, but I had only left it for approximately 17 hours, and it was voice-activated. It shouldn't have recorded more than a few hours of actual sound. 8 hours and 43 minutes meant something had been making noise almost continuously all night. Estrada reviewed the recording in her truck before leaving the canyon. The first several hours matched her expectations. Long silences, punctuated by bat calls, insect sounds, the occasional drip of water. But beginning at approximately the 4-hour mark, she heard something else. Voices. They were faint, like they were coming from very far away, Estrada recalled. I thought maybe hikers had entered the cave without my knowledge, though that seemed unlikely given how remote it was. But when I listened more carefully, I realized the voices weren't continuous. They were inserted. They appeared between other sounds and gaps that shouldn't have been there. Estrada brought the recording to an audio engineer named Daniel Ogwike, who had assisted with her bat research in the past. Ogwike's analysis, completed in December of 2012, revealed something that neither of them could explain. The additional content wasn't layered over the original recording, Ogwike said. It was spliced in. The waveform showed clean breaks, sound, silence, inserted content, more original sound, as if someone had edited the file. But the device Mariana used didn't have editing capability. It was a simple field recorder. Write once memory, and the file metadata showed no modification after the initial recording. Ogwike isolated 43 minutes of inserted audio spread across the 8-hour recording. Most was indistinct, wind-like sounds, low rumbles, what might have been distant machinery. But approximately 7 minutes consisted of human voices speaking English. The voices discussed specific events. They mentioned a name, Catherine Solano, and a date, March 17, 2019, Estrada said. They talked about a building collapse somewhere in Phoenix. They mentioned casualties. They sounded concerned, but not surprised, like they were discussing something that had already happened. In March of 2019, a parking structure at a commercial complex in Phoenix partially collapsed during demolition. 2 workers were injured, one fatally. The worker who died was named Catherine Solano. I didn't know what to do with that, Estrada said. I had a recording from 2012 that seemed to predict something that happened in 2019. Specific names, specific dates, specific circumstances. I wanted to dismiss it as coincidence, as mishearing, but I had Daniel's analysis. I had the original file. I had the timestamp. Ogwike submitted the audio files to 3 separate forensic analysis firms between 2013 and 2017. All 3 confirmed that the recording showed no signs of tampering, editing, or post-capture modification. All 3 noted the anomalous insertion pattern. None could explain how the additional content had appeared. Digital audio doesn't work that way, Ogwike said. You can't add data to a file without changing the file size or metadata. You can't insert content between samples without leaving traces. Whatever happened to this recording, it didn't happen through any process I understand. The Coconino National Forest Service was informed of the recording in 2014 as part of a broader report Estrada filed about unusual acoustic phenomena in wilderness caves. The response was bureaucratic and dismissive. Reported audio anomalies do not fall within forest management jurisdiction. No action recommended. Estrada returned to Sycamore Canyon Cave 7 three more times between 2013 and 2016, leaving recorders overnight on each visit. None of the subsequent recordings showed similar anomalies. The cave appeared ordinary. The bats continued their seasonal patterns. Nothing unusual occurred, but she never deleted the original file. "I've listened to it probably 100 times," she said in 2020, following the confirmation of the Catherine Solano prediction. "There are other things in there. Other names, other dates, events that haven't happened yet. I keep waiting to see if they're right too." She paused. "There's a conversation about a flood, somewhere in Arizona. They mention a town name I didn't recognize at first. I looked it up. It's a small community near the Little Colorado River. The recording says something will happen there in August of 2026. I don't know what to do with that information. I don't know if I should tell anyone. I don't know if telling would change anything or if changing anything is even possible." The recording remains in Estrada's possession, stored on multiple backup drives. She has shared it with fewer than a dozen people. Daniel Ogwike continues to analyze it periodically, searching for patterns or explanations. None have been found. The cave sits empty now, 150 feet of limestone passage in a canyon most people will never visit. The bats still roost there each autumn. The silence between their calls is the same silence that fills any underground space, heavy, mineral, complete. And somewhere in that silence, between 1 second and the next, voices continue to speak about things that haven't happened yet. Whether they're warnings or simply observations, no one knows. Whether anyone is meant to hear them, no one can say. The recording exists. The predictions came true. And in the red rock darkness of Sycamore Canyon, time keeps moving in directions it shouldn't be able to go. Seven geologists went into the desert to map what lay beneath it, and within a year, all of them had quit. Petrified Forest National Park sprawls across 220,000 acres of northeastern Arizona, a landscape of painted badlands and ancient stone trees. The park protects one of the largest concentrations of petrified wood on Earth. The fossilized remains of conifers that fell over 200 million years ago during the late Triassic period, when this region was a tropical floodplain near the equator. The wood was buried by sediment, saturated with silica-rich groundwater, and transformed molecule by molecule into stone. What remains is a forest frozen in time, scattered across hills that glow purple and orange and gray in the desert light. But the surface tells only part of the story. Beneath the Chinle Formation, the layered mudstones and sandstones that give the painted desert its colors, lie older rocks. Permian limestones and dolomites extend hundreds of feet below the visible terrain, remnants of ancient seas that covered this land before the first dinosaurs walked the earth. These older formations are riddled with voids, solution cavities carved by groundwater over millions of years, small caves and fissures that have never been systematically explored. The Navajo and Hopi peoples, whose reservations border the park to the north and east, have oral traditions concerning places beneath the desert where the old ones still dwell. These traditions predate European contact by centuries and are not shared freely with outsiders. When the National Park Service was established at Petrified Forest in 1906, rangers quickly learned that certain areas were avoided by local indigenous workers, areas where the surface showed subtle depressions or where the soil seemed oddly porous. No one asked too many questions. The park had other priorities. In the spring of 1958, the National Park Service authorized a comprehensive geological survey of subsurface features within the park's boundaries. The project was part of a broader initiative to document underground resources across the national park system, driven partly by Cold War interest in potential fallout shelter sites and partly by legitimate scientific curiosity about the region's complex geology. The survey team consisted of 7 individuals. Team leader Dr. Wallace Tompkins, a senior geologist with the United States Geological Survey; Dr. Francis Nakamura, a karst specialist from the University of New Mexico; Dr. Howard Lindgren, a paleontologist interested in Permian-era cave deposits; survey technicians Marcus Boudreau and Gerald Whitehorse; and field assistants Ruth Abeta and Thomas Brennan. All were experienced professionals with extensive backgrounds in cave exploration and geological mapping. The team spent 4 months in the field, from May through August of 1958. Their official report, submitted to the Park Service in October of that year, documented 17 distinct cave features ranging from shallow solution cavities to a 300-foot horizontal passage they designated Cave System 4. The maps were detailed, the geological assessments thorough, the conclusions unremarkable. But the report contained 147 pages, and for 46 years, no one noticed that page 148 existed. The final page was discovered in 2004 by archival researcher Dr. Camilla Reyes, who was digitizing historical Park Service documents at the National Archives facility in College Park, Maryland. The page had been filed separately from the main report, tucked into an unmarked folder that contained miscellaneous survey materials from the same era. The page bore no official letterhead. It was handwritten in blue ink, the script consistent across all text, suggesting a single author with signatures from all 7 team members at the bottom. It was dated August 29, 1958, 3 days before the team officially concluded their field work. The notation read, "Formation in Chamber 7 displays growth patterns inconsistent with known mineralogy. Structure appears crystalline, but does not match any documented mineral composition. Growth orientation suggests active deposition despite absence of water source." Team measured approximately 4 inches of new growth over 17-day observation period. Chamber located via previously unmapped fissure in Cave System 4. Access point has been sealed with available materials and coordinates omitted from official documentation. Recommend immediate and permanent closure of Cave System 4. Do not recommend further investigation. Team agrees unanimously that we were not the first to find this place, and that what made it wants us to leave. Below the text were 7 signatures, matching the names on the official survey roster. Dr. Reyes contacted the Park Service regarding the document in early 2005. The response she received was brief and bureaucratic. No records exist of a Chamber 7 within Petrified Forest National Park survey documentation. The referenced page appears to be an anomalous inclusion of unknown origin. No action is recommended. Reyes persisted. She filed Freedom of Information Act requests for personnel records of the 7 survey team members, hoping to locate them or their families for clarification. What she found instead was a pattern. Dr. Wallace Tompkins resigned from the Geological Survey in February 1959, 4 months after submitting the Petrified Forest Report. He took a teaching position at a small college in Vermont and never published another paper on cave geology. Dr. Francis Nakamura left the University of New Mexico in December 1958, citing personal reasons. She moved to Japan, where she worked in agricultural research until her death in 1987. Dr. Howard Lindgren transferred from field paleontology to museum curation in January 1959. He worked at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science for 30 years and reportedly refused all requests to participate in cave-based research. Marcus Boudreau and Gerald Whitehorse both left federal employment by March 1959. Boudreau became a surveyor for a private construction firm in Louisiana. Whitehorse, who was Navajo, returned to the reservation and worked as a teacher until his retirement in 1991. Ruth Abita married and moved to California, working as a librarian. She never returned to Arizona. Thomas Brennan was the only team member who remained in geological work after 1959, but he specialized exclusively in surface formations and open-pit mining. He died in 2001, 3 years before the final notation was discovered. None of the 7 ever discussed the 1958 survey publicly. When Reyes attempted to contact surviving family members, most declined to participate. One relative, Whitehorse's daughter, speaking anonymously, said only, "My father talked about that survey once near the end of his life. He said they found something that was still growing, still making itself. He said it was older than the petrified trees, older than the desert. He said it knew they were there. And he said the smartest thing they ever did was seal that fissure and walk away." Cave System 4 was never reopened. The access point documented in the 1958 survey was reportedly blocked by rockfall sometime before 1970, though no record of the rockfall exists in park maintenance logs. Modern geological surveys of the park reference 17 subsurface features, the same number documented in the original report. Chamber 7 does not appear on any map. The handwritten page remains in the National Archives, filed now with the main report, a single anomalous sheet among 147 pages of routine geological documentation. The ink has faded slightly. The signatures are still legible. 7 scientists went into the desert in 1958. They found something beneath the petrified trees that grew when nothing should grow, that formed without water or pressure, that seemed to respond to their presence. They sealed the entrance and omitted the location from their maps. And within a year, every one of them had walked away from the work they had dedicated their careers to pursuing. They left behind 1 page of explanation and a lifetime of silence. Whatever they found in Chamber 7, whatever was growing in the darkness beneath 200 million years of stone, is presumably still there, still growing, still waiting. The desert keeps its secrets well, and some things buried in the earth are older than the forests that turn to stone above them. The survey team understood that. They sealed the chamber and left. They just never explained what made them so certain that something down there wanted them gone.